So I think a lot of Logic users will be shocked to find out that Logic actually comes with 7 stock compressors, some of which are emulated after really famous sought-after hardware units like the SSL G-Bus compressor or the 1176. All right, hey guys, this is Shane here from Echo Soundworks, and in this video, we're gonna be covering the stock compressor in Logic X. More specifically, we're gonna be talking about the 7 different compressors all wrapped into that one plugin. So there's 7 different modes or algorithms. And in my opinion, Logic stock compressor is one of the more versatile DAW compressors out there because it comes with 7 compressors. So we're gonna cover each type in this video, talk about what their strong suits are and how you can use them to get better mixes and better productions. All right, so the first compressor that you'll see when you load up Logic stock compressor is the Platinum Digital. Now this one's unique in that it is the only one of the 7 compressors in Logic that's not modeled after an analog or hardware unit. So this is a unique algorithm made by Apple for Logic. All right, so we have a massive patch pulled up from one of our packs. It sounds like this. I want to apply some sidechain compression using the Platinum Digital compressor in Logic. And to do that, you just have to choose your sidechain trigger, your source. So this is, in this example, we're going to be using the kick that you hear, and it's been duplicated to a track that is has no output. So it's called a ghost kick. Now I'm just going to go to the sidechain, select the track that I called ghost kick, and it's that easy. Now, this mode just works really, really well with sidechain compression. I don't know what Apple did to optimize it, but it's very musical when you want either a fast attack, long release, or a slower attack, fast release, sidechain compression situation. It just works really well. It's hard to get a bad result. Now, if we go to some of the other modes, for instance, if we go to the StudioVCA, right, you can hardly tell that sidechain compression is occurring. You really have to jack up the release to get a similar effect, right? With Platinum Digital, we don't have to have the release that high. So for sure, this is the best mode. I do use the StudioVCA in a hip hop track where I don't want that noticeable pumping. I just want room for either the kick or the 808. That's kind of a good go-to for that. So next up is the StudioVCA. Now it looks like this and it looks red because it's actually harkening back to its source material, which is the Focusrite Red compressor. So this compressor is a great choice for multiple sources in the mix. Great choice for parallel compression. It excels on the mix bus or a drum bus. Now, it has the fastest attack of any of the compressors inside of Logic. All right, so you can see pretty clearly that even though the attack was set to 0 milliseconds on both of the compressors, that the attack was much faster on the StudioVCA over the Platinum Digital. Now that highlights a key component of this tutorial is you could have similar attack or the exact same attack, release, ratio, and threshold, and then cycle through the different compressors and you're gonna get a different result from each of those compressors. So let's check out how the StudioVCA sounds on a mix bus or on my master. That's one of the most common uses for the actual Focusrite Red 3. It was a really popular compressor on the mix, the 2-bus, or your master. So I've dialed in some fairly intense settings. I've just dialed back my output a little bit, or I'm sorry, not the output, the mix. We're gonna dial it back to about 80%, and we're gonna A/B it on this mix. Let's take a listen. All right, so I actually like how this compressor sounds. It's just got a pleasant sound, especially in the mid-range, and it can add volume to the mix, especially on the mix bus or the master, without squashing it, without killing the transient. So if you guys haven't messed around with this on your 2-bus, your master, try it out. It's a great choice. So next up is the Studio FET. You guys have probably been sleeping on this one. This one's actually modeled after the 1176 blackface compressors. It's probably one of the most sought after, talked about, revered compressors ever made. So I would say that this compressor has a fast attack and it has a slower release, which allows you to tame and control the transients and the peaks, but also kind of emphasize the punch of the sound because of the slower release. So the 1176 is commonly used on any type of sound or source where you'd want peak control, but you also want to preserve punch, right? So obvious examples of that would be vocals, guitars, bass, and of course drums, whether it's on the bus or individual elements. Now it's a really popular compressor on snare drums, or at least it has been in rock music. And part of that could be because of the harmonics and, just the color that it adds to the sound. So before we move into the next mode or next compressor in Logic, I wanted to touch on a direct comparison to an actual 1176 plugin, because I think it should be mentioned that your user experience with all of Logic's emulations outside of the Platinum Digital and the StudioVCA, so the remaining 5 that we're going to be looking at, are going to be a little bit different from a dedicated plugin that's really trying to be spot on to the original hardware. So for instance, if we take a look at this plugin over to the right, it's the CLA Classic Compressor, CLA 76, and it has all the same controls. It looks really identical or really similar to an actual 1176, and we can see that we have a boatload more control inside of Logic. Now, to some people that will piss them off and offend them because it's not an accurate representation of the hardware. And for other people like myself, I'll think, all right, cool. If it kind of sounds like an 1176, that's awesome. But if I can, dial in different settings I couldn't on the actual 1176 or 1176 plugin, I don't see, I don't see that as not being a benefit. So for instance, on the original unit, the fastest attack setting is actually up here at the right at 7. So it would work in the inverse to a lot of people who use plugins, right? So over here on the Logic version, the fastest attack is at the left. Same with the release, right? And speaking of the attack and release, according to the best of my research, and guys in the comments, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the attack of most of the 1176s it comes out to about 0.8 milliseconds at its fastest, or 800 microseconds, or around there. Whereas with the Logic attack, we can get much quicker. We can go all the way down to 0.0 milliseconds. Now, of course, we're missing the all-ins button, the all-in ratio button, which kind of sucks because that's a really popular feature. It sounds great. It's easy to work with on the original. But on the flip side of that, we have ratios that we just couldn't get with the actual 1176 or the 1176 emulations out there. So for instance, we can start at 1, work our way up, go all the way up to 30, whereas we have fixed ratios on an actual 1176, 4, 8, 12, and 20, right? So there are some key differences, but it does sound similar. It is trying to color the sound in a similar way to most 1176s out there. So the fourth compressor that we have inside of Logic is the Classic VCA. Now this is actually an emulation of a very famous and very sought after DBX compressor called the DBX 165A. So this is a really popular compressor, or it was back when it came out, the hardware unit at least, for drums. It excels on drum sound, whether that's on individual tracks or the drum bus. It's great on drums. So if you're looking for more punch, if you've never used this because you've never gone this far into the different algorithms inside Logic. So this one is also the first compressor in Logic that has an auto attack and auto release. So you'll see that some of the controls are more limited, right? All right, so as you can see, we just have the 3 controls. We have threshold, ratio, and makeup, and a couple auto gain buttons. Now, interestingly enough, I did show you guys a picture of the DBX 165A a couple minutes ago, and some of you might be thinking, well, wait, the 165A has other controls. It has ratio. It has attack and release, right? What's up with that? Well, interestingly enough, the sound and the kind of the circuit and the output of this Classic VCA is more similar to the 165A, but Logic and Apple decided to give it the controls of the DBX 160. Regardless, this is still a prime candidate for drum compression. So I've loaded it up on a snare. Let's take a listen. right? So it's got a pretty responsive attack and release for this snare. Now, like I mentioned before, drums, drums, drums. A lot of people will swear by this on kick drums and snare drums, but you can test it out on a vocal. You can test it out on rap vocals. I've had a couple friends, some peers that have used it on a rap track, and I'm like, what compressor did you use? Like basically a DBX 160 emulation. So you guys could mess around with other sources and see how it works. But the main thing that people do is they throw it on drums and they kind of squash it. They kind of hit it hard, and then they just parallel compress, right? So with Logic's compressor, we can just turn the mix down. All right, so next up, we have the Vintage VCA. Now, this is actually an emulation of one of the holy grails of compression, the SSL G-Bus compressor. So some of my Ableton friends will be like, but you don't have that glue compressor in Logic. Well, I kind of do, because the glue compressor is an emulation of the SSL G-Bus compressor, and I have that right here. So this is a great compressor, obviously, for your bus. It's a great compressor to add character and vibe and color to your track. It's great for just grouped instruments, whether it's vocals, drums, your mix, your master bus, right? It's a very versatile sounding compressor. All right, so let's take a quick listen to the Vintage VCA, the SSL compressor in Logic on a master or on my mix bus. So I'm trying to not get too much of an increase in gain. I want you to hear the glue effect, because this Logic's Vintage VCA does have that sound. It does get that glue. Now, if you're wondering, well, how do you actually describe? Like if you had asked me to describe in words this glue sound that this compressor is capable of, or the SSL compressor itself, right? Well, to my ears, it sounds like it takes everything in the mix, and without ruining or taking away from how you've set up the imaging of your mix in terms of pan, stereo width, volume, your gain staging, it gets everything kind of cozier and tighter sounding. It just seems like everything's more kind of closely related, if that makes sense. So here it is with the compressor off. And on. So next up is the Vintage FET. Now this is actually an emulation of another 1176, the Silverface 1176 compressor. So we have two 1176s in Logic. We have the Blackface and the Silverface. Now, being an 1176 compressor, this is a great compressor for a wide range of sources. It adds a nice color, a nice vibe to pretty much any sound that you put it on. So it's of course going to be similar at points to the Blackface 1176 emulation, but this one's more aggressive as a whole. It's going to just have that more kind of in-your-face, kind of edgy sound to it. So the last compressor is the Vintage Opto. Now this is an emulation of the LA2A compressor. So this is a very famous compressor. You guys have probably heard about the LA2A. A lot of companies make third-party versions of it. So this is one of the best compressors in Logic, in my opinion. Now, when you're using the LA2A, you can use it on a wide range of sources. You'll find it's commonly used on guitars, keys, vocals, leads, basses, but it helps to use it in conjunction with another compressor, a second compressor. You use this one to kind of smooth out the sound, and then the second compressor to really get more volume and really boost the overall loudness of that sound. All right, guys, that's going to sum up this look at the 7 compressors inside a Logic 10. If you have any questions or comments, post those below, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. If you guys like this video, you want to see more videos like it, please hit that subscribe button and smash that notification bell so you guys get an update when we release a new video. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.